Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School!
Oh, this week we're going to get into our third installment of our Nick Cage Festival with Spike Jonze's 2002 film, Adaptation.
Let's dive on in. All right, everybody, I am Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Palter.
And if you like what you see /hear, please like and subscribe. You can find us in all the spaces and places that people
find good media.
That's right. We have festivals that we do. We have 101s, punishment reviews, that one scene. Yeah, forgotten gems. Like, we do a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So please join us for this film history ride.
Yes, it is a ride.
Well, here we are again with Mr. Charlie Kaufman to talk about.
It's true. We really do a lot with him.
Well, technically, this is a Spike Jonze movie, and there's definitely lots of Spike Jonze spice in this.
Oh yeah.
But obviously, this is a very heavily influenced Charlie Kaufman movie. But I think why he keeps popping up in the festival is because he's one of the most original voices we have in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And he does things that don't make sense sometimes.
Well, you remember last week I ended out
total sense.
I ended out our that one scene with Memento talking about how chronology is actually a trope that you can misuse.
Yeah, I love
which
that.
Which by its merit sounds insane. Where you're like, no, that's how you do a movie. And that's the way that Kaufman has approached almost everything that he's done. I mean, some stuff to a lesser extent. I'm thinking of like Science of Sleep is definitely more of like a movie.
Did you Be Kind to Rewind too?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
And that's more of a
playful,
movie.
Yeah.
But most of his stuff that he's known for,
Malkovich.
I mean, Malkovich by its, just looking at the rules of how you make a movie, it doesn't play by him, right? And, Synecdoche definitely doesn't.
No.
And this also does not, because it is, interestingly, it's about the fear of selling out your talent. I think that's
good. I like that.
The heart of this movie.
I think you're right. I think some of it is the writer's journey, of course.
Of course.
Like little things that they throw in there, and we'll get into his VO, but little things like the rewarding himself with a muffin. After he writes something. Like,
she's thinking about how big my ass is.
I've been there, yeah. I mean, like his self-deprecating voiceover is we've talked a lot about voiceover, and this, he's so fucking good at being meta.
Yeah.
And this might be his most meta movie.
Yeah.
Because, at a point in the movie, he's trying to explain to Tilda Swinton, he's like, I'd rather have the movie just exist, rather than it being artificially plot-driven, doesn't
have to be a movie, yeah.
Drug lords, no sex, no guns, no car chases, but does this sound familiar? So
the whole movie
we're basically
becomes...
watching, I remember watching this in the theater being like, so we're watching the movie that he's writing in the movie, but he's somehow twisting it to make us, believe it and love these characters and love both of, we get a 2 for Nick Cage here.
Okay. Let's pause for a second. Okay. You're totally right. But there's so much. Okay.
There's a lot. Sorry.
So let's do this. First of all, simple premise. Charlie Kaufman is slated to make an adaptation of The Orchid Thief by Susan Orlean, and he doesn't know how to do it. That's the playing field we're starting with. Yeah. Right? Is just that.
That's the thread, probably.
That's the thread. And then what happens is we go through the writer's journey, to your point. But along with this, the only part until we get to the third act of this movie, the only part in the first 2 acts that is fiction is Donald Kaufman. Everything else really happened, right? Everything else is him meeting with his agents, who in fact everyone in this movie, with the exception of Donald Kaufman, are the real people. Those are the agents' real names. Mm-hmm. Those are like, all those are based on real human beings that the real Charlie Kaufman in our real world know.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the duality here is pretty straightforward. I'm joking when I say that. But I mean, Donald is the opposite of Charlie.
So let's get into this first then. Who is Donald? I mean, who is he in this movie? Like, who does he represent? Because
I mean, he represents the other side. He represents what Charlie wants to be, right? Because everything comes so easy to Donald. He can scream out, push, push in the bush in the middle of a party and everyone's laughing his ass off, including the person he's going to have sex with later.
Right.
He's better screenwriter, like he just, things just come easier to him, right? And God bless Nick Cage and this Donald the character, because just the little things that he does throughout, just answering the phone, great writer's residence, and just little stupid things like that.
Yes.
Are like the multiple cherries on top of this already fascinating injection of introspection, of writing process, but also life. But I love how you framed it of getting comfortable with selling yourself out. That's a really good way to kind of describe this. But it's also, there's so much deeper shit going on here than that too.
So, and I love your idea. I love your idea that Donald represents everything that Charlie can't be. Mm-hmm. I dated a hippy dippy girl a million years ago, and a lot of her advice was bad. But there was one idea that when she was talking to me about creativity that's always stuck with me, and what she said was, when we are creative, it is the part of us that is not an adult. It is the part of us that is still a little kid, because we have wonder and we have excitement, and we don't start off being creative because we're going to make money from it. It doesn't provide shelter. It doesn't provide, your mortgage. It's you have this idea of this thing that you want to do. And she said, in that way, it's a little kid. It's a little kid who's naive and just thinks things are cool. Right. And she said, but when you are being critical to your own creative process, what does your self-talk look like? And I was like, I'm a fucking failure. Why am I doing this? It's just going to ruin everything. It's going to be awful. And she said to me, now imagine you're saying that to a 9-year-old you. Yeah. And I was like, ooh, that's awful. And she said, what would that 9-year-old do? And I was like, eventually they'd just leave because they'd get their feelings so hurt. And she was like, that's why people stop being creative.
I love that.
Right? And it's always resonated with me. I've held on to that of like, you got to be your biggest advocate. And that's what Donald is here, is that Charlie...
He's the child.
And Charlie kicks him in the balls every chance he gets. Yeah. Right? He's like, Mom's right. It's a taut psychological thriller, right? Like, he's just so mean.
Charlie's too pessimistic.
Yeah.
To have that childlike wonder. And... yeah, when you have his self-deprecating, I hate myself, like, mental, depression, that's not good for that little kid.
Yeah, and that's who Donald is. He's just constantly beating him down, even though the universe is proving Donald right.
Yeah.
Right? Like, over and over and over again, the universe is like, actually, Donald's rad. And he can't accept it until the very end, and then when he accepts it, he becomes all the things he doesn't want to be, in part because those parts of him, he knows he could make a taut psychological serial killer thriller in his sleep, probably. He knows he could fucking do that.
Well, it's funny. It's kind of funny what he's trying to do is he doesn't want anyone to have profound life lessons.
Yeah, no one learns anything.
He wants a show about nothing. He wants Seinfeld.
Yeah, he does. About flowers. He wants Seinfeld about flowers.
He wants to be more like life in reality. And... as a writer, that's great, but it's also how entertaining can that be? You like Brian Cox says later, you have to add the drama man.
Yeah.
You have to, it's no one would come to your movie.
Yeah, people want things. Exactly. Who wants something in what you've made?
So it's him realizing the artistic process, and Charlie, you're doing just fine. You have not sold yourself out. There is no one like you.
I will say, too, to your point, the very meta-ness of him in his meeting with Tilda Swinton saying, I don't want car chases, I don't want drugs, I don't want sex, and all these things, and that's what happens later. He also has this mania moment where he's like, okay, we start at the beginning of the world, and dinosaurs are here for a minute, but then they die, and he does this whole thing. He
describes the first opening scene
that we've already seen,
we've already watched.
Yeah, and you just go, God, it is. We are living in the moment of his creative process, the beautiful and the ugly, right? Like all of it.
He plays tricks on you just like he does with being John Malkovich.
Yes,
I love we get the behind the scenes shit here. It's like amazing. I like the fact that people came back to do that and all that with the little elevator. That elevator is probably just sitting somewhere in a warehouse, anyways. Catherine Keener, everyone.
May I just for one more layer of insane meta-ness? During the filming of Adaptation, there was a scene where Susan Orleans came onto set and was standing next to Charlie Kaufman.
The real Susan Orleans.
And the real Charlie Kaufman. And didn't realize they were each other. Just didn't really notice it. They're kind of standing off, like watching. And Nick Cage said, hey, you guys, history in the making. It's the real Charlie Kaufman and the real Susan Orleans. And he turned and looked at her and she was like, well, this is embarrassing for me. And he goes, not nearly as much as it is for me. And she's like, and he turned and fucking left and never came back.
I've seen him at Sundance and shook his hand. He's an odd, strange guy.
Yeah. Well, and so just to finish,
very introverted. To
finish off this idea, Susan Orleans, when she was first given the script, she's like, I was like, you guys. She actually said, I don't think they're going to make this into a movie because nothing happens in it. She says nobody learns anything at the end of it. I never saw a ghost orchid. It didn't happen. She said, my agent took me out and we got lunch. And I said, cool, let me see the script. And he said, let's get dessert. So we got dessert. And then I was like, cool, let me see the script. And he's like, let's get drinks. And she's like, I don't drink in the middle of the day, but like I did. And she's like, I got pretty tipsy. And then he had me read it. And she's like, I read 20 pages and was like, who's Charlie Kaufman? Because that's the only person in 20 pages of this script. Yeah.
Adaptation.
And she's like, and then once it got into like the drugs and all and she's like, I just was like, I can't do this. Like, I'm a journalist. Like, this looks really bad for me. And her agent was like, yeah, but think about Charlie Kaufman. He's masturbating through half this movie. And she's like, I ended up like relenting and being like, fine. She's like, I got it that I couldn't go by a fake name because I'd be the only fake name in this movie that otherwise was trying to do this thing. She's like, I did have very conflicting opinions about it for a while. She's like, all these years later, when I think about it, she's like, I completely understand what he was trying to do. And she's like, I still don't love it because it's more about him than it is about me or a book that I cared very deeply about. Mm-hmm. She's like, but at the same time, like the fact that I got to be part of that process, she's like, I understand why he made every creative decision he did, but it's his story, and I'm a side character just like everybody else is. Mm. And I thought, like, that's the smartest.
That's gotta be tough.
It is. It has to be, right? But at the same time, I understand it. I understand how she doesn't dislike it. She's like, Meryl Streep played me. That's amazing, right?
Yeah, for sure. And as they say in the movie, John LaRoche is a hell of a character.
Oh, my God.
Chris Cooper here.
Let's talk about Chris Cooper for a minute. Oh, my God.
Did he win the Academy Award for this? I know Charlie Kaufman did. Actually, him and his brother did.
That's right. He
posthumous award without his brother. Ed says Donald couldn't be here.
So,
I don't know if you remember that.
God, the reality is so thin.
It really is.
It's a paper thin reality for that guy.
Do a little research and understand what's going on.
Yeah, it's like he's a living, breathing Philip K. Dick character.
I can see that.
Where the reality is just like, ooh, if you went too far this direction, you're in a whole new...
I know Cooper was at least nominated. He's so fucking good here.
And I think my only knowledge of him before this was really American Beauty.
Yeah.
And like the characters could not be more different. But I love their conversations. Let's talk about how we flip between the neuroses of Charlie and David, or Charlie and Donald, and then going to LaRoche and Orlean in these rides in the van, listening to Darwin book on tape, like
obviously
him missing his front teeth.
I'm probably the smartest guy I know.
Yeah. Let's talk about this. Like, how do you feel like that those conversations they're having dovetail into this creative journey / paralysis?
I think John's view of the world is very important to have in this movie, because I think it's trying to say a lot of things that she wants to say, that Charlie's going through, that he wishes he had the bravery to do, like his whole fuckfish monologue. Like, I just stopped caring. But it's like, he can't really, like, just casually buy into something. He's either in it or he's not, right? And so his point of view and his carelessness, it's not really carelessness because he's an extremely smart person. I'm not sure the best way to describe it.
It's like Shakespearean passion. It's like either I love this so much I'll kill myself for it, or I'm fucking done. And he's out, right?
Or just like his ability to quickly move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
It's probably why he's not married, right? It's probably, why he gets into porn, whatever, but he's also like, he's the master of all of the things that he knows about. And the whole flower part of it and getting to know him. And obviously a lot of that changed with, why he's missing his teeth, why he lost all of the shit.
God, that is so messed up.
Gnarly car crash that comes out of nowhere in this movie. I remember seeing it again in the theater, and that was not, you did not see that coming. Now I'd seen this movie a bunch of times now,
right,
and was ready for it. But like, man, the first time you see that, it is a shocking scene.
And heartbreaking.
And you're in the car when people are getting pretty fucked up.
Yeah. It's interesting because I totally agree with you that he, much like Donald, LaRoche is able to...
Yes, he's more like Donald than Charlie.
Yeah, he's able to...
He's the yin to her yang.
Yeah, to become obsessive and understand why he's obsessive, and it just makes sense to him. And you're right that Orlean is more like Charlie in... But why? I want to know the why. I want to question why. I'm overanalyzing and picking apart...
He does.
Why you might love a thing.
But what he wouldn't be as good as he is if he didn't think like that.
Well, and
or as unique as he is.
Let's talk about the overlapping almost Venn diagram of the multiple uses of the word adaptation. Because obviously this is an adaptation of a book. Mm-hmm. But there's this moment in LaRoche and Orlean's conversation about animals, plants, different things adapting, right, and changing. And obviously, the beginning of this movie, we see 2001 Monkey Man come up onto land, like, start breathing air. Like, we have the adaptation of an entire species. Mm-hmm. So obviously, adapting Susan Orlean's book, and then his own struggles within that. But then there's all these other versions of adaptation, and one of the ones that LaRoche and Orleans talk about is the adaptation of plants, of birds, of insects, all these different animals, right? And there's a moment where she says, adaptation is a profound process. It means you've found how to thrive in the world. Yeah, but plants have no memory. For humans, adapting is almost shameful. Yeah. It's like running away. And for her, for Orlean, she's talking about her own personal life. But in the movie's context, that, to me, that's Charlie realizing that to make a living at his art, he has to have concessions. He can't always do exactly what he wants. Like, to adapt someone else's screenplay means he does have to add car chases, means that he does have to add a love story, means he does have to do all these things, and that it's shameful to him because it means that I have my own memory of what I want as an artist, and I'm not doing it because I have to do this other thing.
Well, he also has to adapt to his brother being a good writer. And
that's a really good point.
he comes to him for his advice. He looks up to him, like he loves his brother. But like you said, he kicks him in the balls every chance he gets, and it just bounces off him because he just does. He's that childlike wonder character.
Yeah,
and so it is pretty again meta to have him try to explain the complexity of writing the three. And there's only one character as we watch the movie.
Trick photography.
Yeah, and then they talk about, how have the character having multiple personalities.
Yes.
And you're like, oh my god, you guys are just hitting this so much on the head. It's just very meta. And I know you have this great thing about what the actual movie The Three is, right?
Well, there's a couple things.
Okay.
One, and this was something you said, because we saw this movie together in the theater.
Yes.
And you said, there's only one thing I would change. And I said, what is that? And you were like, there should have been a fake trailer at the beginning of the movie that was for the movie The Three.
Yeah.
You're like, I wanted there to be a fake trailer for some movie where you're like, why would anybody see that? That's horrible. And then you watch the movie and you're like, holy shit, it's Donald Kaufman's. You could even put like, by visionary screenwriter Donald Kaufman, right? Like you could do that. Of course, this isn't Tropic Thunder. It's fine that they didn't do that.
Yes.
But several years later, they did make a thriller horror movie called Identity, starring John Cusack, that is about a serial killer with multiple personalities, and that nobody knows that until the very end. And they're like, it's all but you, but I, we all have the same birthday, right? And that was a good enough joke. But here's part of the reason why art's amazing. Part of the reason why art is amazing, I may have already talked about this before, but
I hope so.
I think I may have talked about this last year on this show. Part of the reason why art is amazing is because on a long enough timeline, the jokes just get fucking better. Because Charlie Kaufman made the fucking Three, and it's called I'm Thinking About Ending Things. He made his own version of two characters stuck inside the brain of a third character.
You're right. That's so funny.
He did it. And he was like, you can't do it. That doesn't make any sense. He made the movie.
That's funny. I was about to correct you and say, no, Donald wrote that.
Charlie Kaufman made, and if he really wanted to put the nail on the head, he should have had at the end of I'm Thinking About Ending Things is that it was written by Donald Kaufman.
Yes.
Based on a story called The Three. Because he did it himself. So him lamenting in Adaptation that there's no way you could do it, he found out a way to do it because he adapted another story, but he took out all the serial killer or creepy killer vibe from the book and instead turned it into like a dance montage and like an animated pig. Like he put in all these other ways to get around both of these characters are inside of a third character's head. Like he made the Three.
Wow. I'm thinking of anything actually was not anything he wrote either.
Exactly. But he adapted it.
Yes.
So he made another adaptation, totally changed the fucking book, but it's basically the Three.
Wow. So meta.
Right?
Even after.
It gets so fucking meta.
Oh, man. There's so many moments of that.
Yeah.
I mean, even, again, let's talk about the voiceover because it is so important here.
Oh, my God.
To be in his own head and it helps explain his character. But, of course, he goes to Robert McKee's $500 screenwriting class. And
why am I here? I shouldn't be here.
Yeah, while he's paranoid, while he's talking through this whole 2-3 day seminar, he's like, and God help you if you use voiceover.
God help you!
Friends.
Yeah.
Any idiot can write the feelings of the characters.
And then I love like what a drill sergeant he is up on stage, and then how warm and personable he is when the two of them hang out. I'm like, oh, I love that. Like
I do too. And he actually goes and he's like, "Hey, buy me a drink. Let's talk."
Yeah,
it's awesome.
And he has great advice. He's like, whittle it down, but at the same time, you're like, he can't. Robert, you don't understand this guy's brain. He can't whittle this down. There's no way.
No way. But he says, writing a story where nothing happens and no one changes, more reflection of the real world, no conflict or evolution, no use for it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Really quick, I want to do this quote. In an interview, Kaufman said, the idea of how to write Adaptation didn't come to me until quite late. And it was the only idea that I had, and I liked it, and I knew that there was no way it'd be approved if I pitched it. So I just wrote it, and I never told the people I was writing it. I only told Spike Jonze as we were making Being John Malkovich, and he saw how frustrated I was. Had he said I was crazy, I don't know what I would have done. He said, I really thought I was ending my career by turning that in.
Wow.
He was like, sorry, and that's what he handed in.
I could see why.
And in that way,
but
he's
underestimating his genius.
And in that way, to me, the only real villains in this movie,
it's himself.
Well, I was going to say is Tilda Swinton's character as the producer, and then what's his bucket from Office Space?
Yeah,
as his agent, right? Because, fuck her in the ass, like that whole thing, oh god. But like those are the actual real villains in it because they're the ones who want
something from him.
That isn't the thing that he keeps telling people that he wants to do, right? But that they are the catalyst from which we get this insane movie, which is really interesting.
Man, Ron Livingston, isn't that?
That's it, Ron. Thank you.
Yeah, man, this movie just puts you in circles, and the fact that it turns into all the things he doesn't want it to be, and it works in the most beautiful symphony of a way, and you don't even realize that he's tricking you into this. I don't know. It's pretty fascinating how he can do this. And really, we've talked a lot about Charlie Kaufman because obviously he's the main character and the writer and everything. But Spike Jonze does so much great shit here.
Oh yeah,
and a lot of the B-roll, a lot of just the way the movie looks, how it's shot. He's definitely got his stamp on this too.
Oh, for sure. Well, and I think that the movie does something. I know there are people who like Charlie Kaufman and they don't love this movie. And I think part of the reason why is because when it gets to that third act and Donald starts helping to write, it owns it 100%. There's no moment after Donald starts helping and it's like, she's on the porn site. It is a drug. Like all of that is done exactly the way movies like that are done.
Exactly. Yes.
And I think that could turn some people off who love the snarky first two acts. And it's weird. The only movie I could really think of to compare it to in this way, even though this is not a comparison at all, is if we reviewed last Halloween, we reviewed Malignant. Mm-hmm. And Malignant, like, tonally, you're like, there's something weird happening here, and I don't know what it is, right? And it isn't until you get to the reveal of like, it's a fucking B movie, and it's an evil twin thing, and it's like ridiculous, that you go, oh, this is the joke. And James Wan was in on the joke from moment one.
You just weren't.
You just weren't, and so tonally you didn't understand what was happening.
Yeah, you're like, oh, they really cheaped out at the end there.
Yeah, like why is it like that? Yeah,
no, that's the irony.
That's the whole point, right? And he went full like all the way in. He was like, either you're with it or you're gonna hate it, and that's what Act 3 of this is. And I really respect it for that, where it's like it never winks at you. It goes to a full heartbreak moment of like that Donald isn't going to make it. Like it goes through that whole thing and it takes it completely seriously. And Cage takes it completely seriously and he's acting his ass off.
Oh man, so good. Here.
And
is this his best performance?
I mean,
it has to be up there.
To me, it's one of his most heart-wrenching because he's playing those two characters. Like, it's so interesting to watch him. And you know what? We reviewed Face Off before. You know what I want to see? I want to see a remake of this that's just Nicolas Cage playing both characters. They'd make the joke even funnier that they take one guy's face off and put it on the other guy because they look identical.
This is the real face.
This is the real face off. But I just love seeing him play these two characters that look identical. It's not like you put a wig on one of them and you're like, oh, that's the other brother. They dress the same. It's just the way they hold themselves. Yeah. And their facial gestures. Yeah. One of them isn't 400 pounds. My super fat brother, Donald. Yeah. No, they didn't have to. They didn't have to do that. But it is like how different they seem when there's no difference between the two of them.
And the beauty is, it has to go there, right?
Yeah, it has to.
They have to follow her to the airport.
How else do you get to the end of this thing?
Scene,
You have to do it.
There has to be some kind of resolution.
Yeah.
Whether it's finishing the script or going through these experiences. So, what a wild movie. Honestly, one of the most unique movies that I can remember.
Last thing I'll say about it is, even when we're in that third act, where it has turned into a fucking episode of CSI, like it's just so corny.
Alligator attack.
Yeah, and just car chases and like, oh my god,
cocaine.
come on, yeah. We get a respite for a moment that again goes back to this: your creative self, your better self. To your point, who you wish you were, and they're sitting behind that log, and Donald tells the story about the girl, and he's like, if she didn't like me, that's her business. I didn't let it ruin, like I know they were making fun of me, but that doesn't change the fact of how I felt about her. And you just go, that's so Taoist, right? It's such a perfect.
I mean, the way he ends the movie is that quote where, you are what you love, not what loves you.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what he needed to find out. He's so worried about what other people think or what he thinks about himself, but it's really about the things that you love. Not it. It's too selfish to think like that.
It's probably one of the only moments of joy that miserable bastard has had his entire life is when he handed in this script and they went, actually, we love it.
Fucking genius,
right? That had to have been. That must be why they put that. Why he put that
Spike
quote
Jones
there.
Had to have something to do with it.
Oh, of course. But I just think like, yeah, like to be like, why would I do this? Like, what kind of awful asshole am I? The Ouroboros, the snake that eats its own tail. Like, I am the Ouroboros. Like, why would I do this? I put myself in the fucking story. What the hell's wrong with me? Right? And then for people,
one thing you shouldn't do.
Yeah, and people were like, "This is great," and that had to be the most.
That's a big leap of faith.
Well, think about it. I mean, after this, we have Eternal Sunshine.
Yeah. If being John Malkovich wasn't so revered, he probably couldn't have gotten away with this movie.
Right. But right after Eternal Sunshine, he makes Synecdoche. Mm-hmm. This had to be the movie again that gave him the confidence, so that people told him like, "You're not a psycho. You're really creative,
really wild way of looking at the world.
Yeah, you have a really weird.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, people want to hear it.
He's evolved. He's more brave than he was the day before. Right?
Exactly,
and that's all that really matters.
He's adapting.
Yes. Oh my god! What a fucking wild movie that just gets so wrapped up, and like we can keep going.
Oh my god, we totally could.
Nick Cage, truly a genius. Honestly, unabashedly love him. Like, we'll get into this when we get into our next week's movie, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. But he's a character unto himself.
Yes.
And
what a career.
And there's some great stuff. And I can't wait to talk about this movie with you. It's so perfect. We have to end the fest with it. There's no other choice.
I mean, I'll just say this. The fact that between Raising Arizona and this, and then to say, and Face Off definitely is part of it, but that there was a period of time in the 90s where he was an action star.
Big time.
Like, there's not a lot. Are there any other actors that have had this diverse of a career?
I don't know. We'll get into that next.
Do you know what I mean, though? Like, it's so rich. There's so much. So, anyway,
we'll get into it next week. Please like and subscribe.
Yes.
Right along and finish this Nick Cage ride with us. We'll do Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
There you go.
It's like the heartbreaking work of staggering genius.
Yeah, I was going to say, it does feel very Dave Eggers.
Like
yes.
One of those, like, word salad movies.
Yes, indeed.
And then next week, we'll figure out that one scene to do.
Yes.
And please join us, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, you guys.